This is CNN.
Tonight on the Capitol Gang, a matter of life and death. Congress votes on U.S. war in the sand. A final meeting for peace in Baghdad. And a very different war waged in the Soviet Union. Now, from Washington, the Capitol Gang.
Welcome to Capitol Gang. I'm Pat Buchanan with the regulars, Mark Shields, Robert Novak, Al Hunt. Our guest, House Republican Whip Newt Gingrich of Georgia. Newt, thanks for coming back and joining us after the great debate.
Pat, it's good to be here.
3 days of anguished debate ended today with Congress voting a virtual declaration of war. Enough Democrats in both houses ignored their leadership to give the president the authority to attack if Iraq is not out of Kuwait by midnight Tuesday. One focus of controversy in the debate, the mindset of President Bush.
If we adopt this resolution, we're undercutting the president's position of leadership.
Don't give me this thing about let's have peace by giving authority to go to war next week. The president doesn't believe that. He's ready to go, and he's given an ultimatum. He's told everybody he's going to kick ass.
Did Congress really have any other choice, Mark?
Oh, sure, Pat. 229 members of the Congress voted against the president's position, against what Steve Solars, the principal sponsor of the prevailing resolution in the House, called the equivalent of a declaration of war. And I think that they were undoubtedly influenced by the kind of things that appeared in Al's paper. A senior Gulf official being quoted by the Wall Street Journal as saying that he wouldn't send his kids to war because we have white American slaves to do our fighting for him. And they were probably influenced by the Saudi Arabian teacher who told the New York Times that we have foreign workers. We have Pakistanis to drive our taxis, and we have Americans to defend us. And I think that there is a real question. I'm glad we had the debate. I'm glad we had the vote. But I don't think there was any question that the president could have been beaten today.
Newt, the Democrats were about 3-1, I guess, against the president. Republicans almost solid in support. Was it a partisan vote?
No, I think it was genuinely bipartisan in terms of the coalition that had people like Solars and Torricelli and others who, at some risk, voted with the Republicans. There were 10 Democratic committee chairmen in the House who voted with us. And I guess I disagree with Mark from this standpoint. There's a real gamble underway here. Almost everyone says they agree that Saddam Hussein needs to be driven out. The question is, would the alliance have held together for 6 months or a year during a period that Congress was undermining George Bush's stated policies, given the Allies' fear of the Congress, frankly? And I'm not at all sure that the Allies, if the Congress had voted today to wait 6 months or a year, I'm not at all sure that this alliance would have held together.
This is about as much alliance as the UN was that the Korea was a UN war. This is an American operation. I don't agree with Mark that they had any choice on this, because the Democratic leadership should have brought this up for a vote after November, when there was time, before there was any deadlines involved, and they could have really debated. They made a blunder, so they were under the gun. Another fact was that AIPAC, the pro-Israel lobby, was the biggest ally of the Republicans. That's why you were getting such strange bedfellows, the pro-Israel congressmen in the House, voting for this. Another factor is that many Republicans told me that they really hated voting for this, but they felt they had to for the president. I don't think there has ever been a vote to go to war in the history of this country where there was such division as was shown, and such anguish as it was shown on the floors of both houses.
Al, there was anguish, and it was an excellent debate on both sides.
It was an incredible debate, Patrick. I saw some on television. I listened. I came home one night in my car radio and just stayed out there for 20 minutes because the debate was so good. It made me the best debate I've ever heard. And they were eloquent on both sides. I mean, Bill Cohen, Sam Nunn, Speaker Foley, I thought was eloquent today. Leader Michael it was just a wonderful debate. It's a debate. Bob's right. It should have been held 2 months ago. I think that did change. It would have been a tragic mistake, however, if we do go to war, to have gone to war without this debate and without this vote. I think it was an incredibly wrenching and difficult vote.
How is it?
I agree with Newt, however. I think probably it was better to have voted the way they did, because I think otherwise the message to Saddam would have been tragically
misinterpreted. Let me tell you why I agree with Al, Mark. It is that I think if the president had been denied, or one house had voted against him the authority there would have been no question but that he would have gone to war immediately. He would have had to. I think his presidency is on the line, his convictions, his belief, and I think he would have gone.
So, in other words, Pat, he's going to war anyway, so give him the votes to go to war.
I think he would have. I think
even though you don't. No.
I think if he had any freedom of motion to move or to hold or to wait, if you'd undercut him, you would have taken that away.
But you're a historian.
Just one second.
Sure.
Just one response. There'll be doctoral dissertations in the 23rd century written about this at some point. But let's get one thing straight. Al and Bob both said it would have been better to have this vote in the debate in November. Yeah. You said the same thing. The White House opposed it, and the leadership of the Congress went along with that. So, I mean, it was the White House that opposed a vote until this last few days.
But the Democrats don't do everything the president does.
No, but I mean, that was in question, that was in pursuit of national unity.
But to be honest, the two leaders of the Democratic Party who dominate the Congress, Mitchell and Foley, they both oppose the president. They oppose going to war now, and yet they were the ones that did not call Congress back into session when they could have called him back in and debated this in November.
Both sides were wrong on that.
You know, Newt, you're a historian, and I don't think we should pass this over, that there is no time in the history of this country where we are about to put 400,000 American troops at risk, that you have a virtually divided position in the Senate of the United States, closely divided in the House of Representatives. That's unusual.
Well, Newt, why don't we, sorry if we'll wait on this, give Newt a chance to respond. The gang and Newt will be back with a final mission for peace.
The Capital Gang is brought to you by Lexus High Performance Luxury Automobiles, the result of a relentless pursuit of perfection. And by EDS, the world's most experienced computing and communication services company.
After years of intense work, Lexus is ready to celebrate. Because even at the equivalent of 145 miles per hour, the Lexus LS400 is designed to stir the soul and not much else.
Wherever you do business, the future is approaching at breakneck speed. And the road your business travels is constantly changing. But you can take advantage of change with the world's most comprehensive computing and communication services from EDS. EDS can help you be more competitive by focusing technology on business goals, by creating ways to improve quality and save time by making everything work together. We can even help you manage it. You can't control change, but you can take advantage of change with EDS.
I wish I didn't have to take a laxative. Phillips, right, but it's going to taste chalky. I still don't like the flavor. Well, all right. Hey, that didn't taste like Phillips. Sold.
Welcome back. UN Secretary General Perez de Cuellar is in Baghdad tonight. His 11th hour mission for peace follows the failure of Wednesday's Geneva meeting between Secretary of State Baker and Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz. The two men emerged from 6 hours of talks, sounding less like diplomats than warriors.
If it should choose to continue its brutal occupation of Kuwait, Iraq will be choosing a military confrontation which it cannot win.
If they decide to attack Iraq, we will not be surprised.
After today's vote, President Bush was asked if there is any way left to avoid war.
You might say an instant commencement of a large-scale removal of troops with no condition, no concession, and just heading out.
What are the chances Saddam will order a withdrawal before those airstrikes begin? Newt?
I want to come back to this whole discussion we had a minute ago. Look at what we just saw. Imagine that Perez de Cuellar was now walking into a room with Saddam Hussein and the Congress had voted down the resolution. What kind of leverage at that point does the UN Secretary General have to negotiate? Instead, he can say tonight, look, there is no hope. You're either going to give in or the United States and its allies are going to come after you.
That's just the point. They had no choice but to vote
But it
down.
seems to me that's in fact an argument that this was probably, if you want peace and you're committed to stopping Saddam, this was probably the only step Congress could have taken to strengthen
I agree.
Perez de
72
Cuellar.
hour before the ultimatum. But go ahead, Mark.
What about the answer to the question?
I think the odds are 1 in 3 that Saddam Hussein will in fact cave before the deadline.
I don't think he will cave before the deadline. I think there might be 1 in 3. The 16th you'll hear from him. Go ahead, Mark.
I just don't like to hear one side described as favoring force and the other side opposing force. I mean, we have right now, we're on our way to having more men in armed underarms in the Persian Gulf than we had in Vietnam up until 1968. All right?
That's right.
Okay, I mean, that's an enormous commitment. We're the most effective and most dramatic blockade. A blockade and embargo. We talked about sanctions. Right. It's an embargo and a blockade that has cut off 95% of that country's outgo. I mean, this has been an act of force, and there wasn't a
Certainly,
ruling out.
blockade
They
is an
weren't
act of war.
precluding
You're
force.
exactly
I mean,
right.
it wasn't like they're saying we're all coming back to Fort Dix in the morning. I mean, it was a strong statement that was endorsed by Sam Nunn and by David Boren and George Mitchell.
Al, what do you think the chances are this guy, Saddam Hussein, has gotten the message that he doesn't want war so badly that he will at least announce a partial withdrawal or something that will stay the president's hand? I think most of us agree if he doesn't do something on the 16th or 17th, all bets are off.
Absolutely. I think it's a little bit better than 1 in 3. First of all, I think the breakdown in Geneva was totally predictable. It was an overblown and an overcovered event. If Saddam is going to retreat, the last place in the world he's going to do it is sitting down with Americans. He's never going to give it to Jim Baker. That never had any chance for success at all, so therefore I think that meant nothing.
What are you looking to, the French and the Soviets or Perez de Cuellar?
The Arabs. I think there's two possibilities. I think, number one, Saddam has tragically miscalculated the effects of an air war and what it'll do to him, and he's playing a false history of his experience in the war with Iran. Or secondly, he's playing a shrewd poker game, and at the very last minute, in response to his Arab brethren, he is going to engage in a partial retreat, at which point I then think it'll be impossible for... I also think, by the way, Pat, everyone's going to Baghdad over the next 3 or 4 days, and he probably loves that.
Yeah, I'll tell you something, Al, you have been very, very complimentary to the president on the way he's handled this proposition. Can you imagine a position right now where all our chips are on Saddam Hussein's good sense? That's where we are right now. Yeah. I mean, we have got this huge expeditionary force. We're on the edge of absolute chaos in the Middle East, and what are we have nothing to say about it.
Exactly,
it's whether Saddam is going to be a good boy or not.
We have no flexibility
ridiculous.
left. The United States, Newt, he's exactly right, is on automatic pilot to war if Saddam Hussein doesn't do something. Should we be in that position?
If you guys were sitting here in 1935 doing radio about Abyssinian Italy, or you were here in 1939 talking about Nazi Germany, you're right. When you're dealing with a dictator, in the end, the dictator is going to have a big part of the decision. We've made a decision. We're committed with virtually the entire civilized world to stop this guy. Now, and everybody agreed with that. I mean, there was no disagreement in Congress that we're all committed to stopping him. We're arguing about how to stop him, but the truth is, unless he decides to withdraw, sooner or later, even in the Nunn situation, sooner or later, there is going to be military conflict.
You know what the problem is? He's not Adolf Hitler.
You know,
that
Newt, it ain't the civilized world that's going to stop him. It's going to be Americans and a few British troops. That's right. The civilized world.
Now, Pat, you say we're on automatic pilot toward war. What you want to do is to press the accelerator today by giving George Bush the vote, huh?
No, I think the only thing that can stop it is Bush himself, who can delay. I think the president can delay it for a week or 2 weeks. But if you had undercut him today, I think you had given him no choice but to go on the 16th or 17th. That's what I believe. I would have voted with the Republicans. Soviet support for Mr. Bush's Gulf policy was reaffirmed personally by Mikhail Gorbachev in a phone call Friday. At that very hour, Soviet paratroops were rampaging through Vilnius, Lithuania, firing live ammunition to scatter demonstrators. Did the crackdown on Lithuania even come up during Mr. Bush's chat?
It was mainly about the Gulf, although we did talk about this. And of course, I am very hopeful that they can find a way to resolve these extraordinarily complex problems without resorting to force.
Some Democrats in the Senate debate feel the White House is ignoring Soviet repression.
As we debate today and are consumed by this issue, the Soviets are rolling into the Baltic states.
Today, Gorbachev ruled out any further Army action. Is Moscow using the Gulf crisis as cover to smash the independence movement's Al Hunt?
Well, Pat, there's a long history of that. You know, going back to 1956 when they went into Hungary during the Suez crisis. I think it's probably a slight exaggeration to say that. But I'm really not surprised by the tepid response from the Bush administration. After all, this was the president who really acquiesced to a far more brutal repression in Tiananmen Square a year and a half ago.
This is an absolute outrage, the president's position, saying he hopes they can avoid force. What the hell does he think they're doing there? I mean, they've been using force through the Baltics, and everybody knew, we knew for weeks in advance, have been writing it, that they were going to do this just as you came to the vote in the House of Representatives. I'll tell you what, my sympathy is a lot more with the Lithuanian people, who has been subjugated by the Soviets for 60 years, and than they are with the Emir of Kuwait.
Newt, every single Republican platform I remember in my lifetime says we're going to stand up for the captive nations of Eastern Europe, and a lot of them mention Lithuania by name.
I think by any reasonable standard, if we're going to be for a free Kuwait, we have to be for a free Lithuania. I think the fact is we have to be diplomatically very tough on this issue. We have to be prepared, I think, to communicate to the Soviets that we will cut off aid, we'll cut off economic support, we'll take whatever steps are necessary if, in fact, they engage in this kind of systematic repression.
The question, I think, is in Edward Shevardnadze's valedictory, whether he was warning Gorbachev or warning others against Gorbachev. I mean, this may be the first time that they've repoed the Nobel Peace Prize.
All right, has Gorbachev left the forces of reform and joined the forces of repression?
Well, I would hardly call today a reform, the actions of this past week, reform movement.
If he has his time's numbered.
Next on Capitol Gang, rumbles right and left.
To help fight the corrosive effects of salt and water, every Lexus features airbag terminals plated in gold. Of course, we might have used a less expensive material, but it wasn't money we were interested in saving.
I get this awful sinus pain, crushing, pounding. It's agony.
Are you still taking any of these sinus pain formulas? They all made news in the 80s. Surprisingly, they all have the same medicine. Today's news is Dristan Sinus. Only Dristan Sinus combines the leading decongestant with the modern pain reliever ibuprofen.
I found it relieves my sinus pain wherever it strikes, and no drowsiness.
So if you're taking the same medicine that made news in the 80s, get new Dristan Sinus, today's sinus medicine.
As Nancy Walsh saves for her son's education, her savings and those of millions like her are invested in business. When business grows, our nation prospers and becomes more competitive in the world, which could open up a world of opportunities. And who will be there seeking out those opportunities for you and Nancy Walsh? Merrill Lynch. We're bullish on the future.
Welcome back. While preparing the nation for war, President Bush faces new trouble at home. Federal takeover of the bankrupt Bank of New England has raised new worries of a long and deep recession. This week, the attacks on Mr. Bush were coming from both his flanks. On the left, Senator Kennedy deplored the absence of an anti-recession program.
If we can spend so much defending the throne of the Emir of Kuwait, why can't we do something to defend the jobs of American workers?
On the right, the Heritage Foundation has announced its patience with Mr. Bush is now exhausted. The think tank's president, Ed Fulner, declared, quote, "We know Ronald Reagan, and George Bush has shown he is no Ronald Reagan." Is this anything for Mr. Bush to concern himself with, Robert?
It sure is, and the biggest problem is he's not concerning himself with it. He is 98% committed to this whole crisis that has built up in the Persian Gulf, when in fact His real problem is a financial crisis in America. The Republican Party has been split by his breaking of the tax pledge. He is in terrible shape economically, and I understand there's a very good chance the State of the Union may be entirely on foreign policy, on the New World Order, without talking about an absolutely desperate economic condition in this country.
What is the Republican Party's platform to get the country out of the recession it's in, if there is any?
I think the State of the Union has to call for a real economic growth package, and I think that, frankly, has to include things like a FICA tax cut, and it has to include capital gains. I also think that we have to have some very real steps towards replacing the welfare state with new approaches such as choice in education.
Newt, any chance that's going to be in the State of the Union? It's got to be shaping up now. These things take about 2 months to write.
I think there's every chance that we're going to have that kind of economic growth and dramatic reform State of the Union.
Mark, are you concerned by the conservative rumbles against Mr. Bush?
Well, Charlie Black, the Republican Party spokesman, said it made the cruelest cut of all at these his fellow conservatives were criticizing President Bush. He said they were inside the Beltway sort of people, which I thought is about as tough as you can say.
I'm outside the Beltway.
Out of touch. Bob, of course, is far outside the Beltway.
Quarter of a mile.
That's right. No, the interesting thing, Pat, on the Bank of New England, it just strikes me, there is a real inequity that we're seeing again in this recession with
they bailed out the
big boys, and the little banks go under, and boy, I mean, what a message it is.
That's not the point.
The Harlem National Bank.
Yeah, well, everybody over $100,000 was taken care of in the Bank of New England. And the Harlem Bank, it went under.
That's
they paid off 50% of the guys.
That's not the point. That's liberal drivel.
It's a point.
Drivel. It happens to be true. A couple points here, Pat. I think, first of all, the Persian Gulf really has frozen the linebackers, so nothing's going to happen in the short run because of that. Over the longer run, there may be more of a fear. Newt, I want to tell you, Vic Fazio, the House Democratic campaign chairman, will be ecstatic to hear you're calling for a capital gains tax cut, because that'll imperil a lot of Republicans if they push that. But the third point to make, Pat, is that to go after George Bush, you gotta have an opponent. Now, I want to say right now, on my right, I think 2 of the 3 possibilities are there, and Novak, you ain't one of them.
You know, the idea... Go ahead.
No, I just want to say, first of all, only if you assume that the Republican Party is going to be totally inarticulate can you assume that in the middle of a recession that we can't explain jobs and economic growth. I mean, I don't think there's anything fair about having people laid out of work because left-wing Democrats believe in an old-fashioned class warfare theory. And the fact is that capital gains will raise property values, it will create jobs, and you have a simple choice. Do you want to create jobs? And you're going to do Teddy Kennedy's old-time...
I think a Republican package, if we're in a recession and the Republicans are trying to do something, will get a lot of support. But let me ask you this, Mark, you know this country. If the American airstrikes start next week, by week's end, my guess is this whole country will rally behind the president in a time of crisis and time of war. They always do.
I tell you what, I'll tell you what, I'm sorry.
Okay, but no, I mean, all wars are popular for the first 30 days, Pat, and I mean, that's absolutely true. I think there will be a sense of national unity. They'll be behind the president, but Bob is absolutely right. This is the only war we've gone into with this kind of deep division in the country. It isn't going to go away if that war continues.
There's enough support to declare war. I don't know if there's enough support to fight this war.
If it lasts a while.
Wait a second. First of all, almost no American war except Pearl Harbor has been popular when we went into it. The German Americans
Korea was
very
popular.
Right,
World War I was popular at the beginning.
Sure.
No, it wasn't. The deep division over World War I and the Spanish-American War, the Republican Speaker of the House resigned in protest. I'm just saying, first of all. Second, if this war lasts more than 6 or 7 weeks, it is a failure. I mean, this war has got to be over very, very fast.
For a whole host of reasons.
That's the last word. Thanks very much for coming over and joining us again. We'll see you again back on The Gang, and we'll be back with our outrages of the week.
In the last 20 years, Road and Track has named the 10 best cars in the world only 6 times. This time, they selected a performance luxury sedan with the world's first full active suspension system, the Infiniti Q45. To find out why, do what they did. Take a long, hard test drive.
Prodigy makes your PC a powerful tool.
And now they've even added an encyclopedia.
Awesome. I do my shopping at home.
Pay my bills.
And I can learn something new.
Prodigy now has a 21-volume electronic encyclopedia that's updated quarterly.
All right, Prodigy.
Just press a couple of keys.
Prodigy connects your computer to sports, news, shopping, and now an encyclopedia that never goes out of date, all for only $12.95 a month.
You have just got to get this thing.
It's even got an encyclopedia. Prodigy.
In stores everywhere.
The brutal occupation of Northern Ireland.
Get out of Belfast. You're in danger here.
Secret death squads of Britain.
Is an intelligence matter outside your jurisdiction.
A worldwide cover-up.
They want this thing buried.
A truth that can never be buried.
I don't ask your cooperation. I demand it.
The political thriller of the decade. Hidden agenda. Every government has one.
Now playing. Check newspapers for local theaters.
In weather this raw, don't take chances, take chapstick. This infrared camera compares lips sealed with chapstick and lips without chapstick. Chapstick seals in moisture to heal and prevent chapped lips. Don't take chances, take chapstick.
My outrage of the week, I guess it's almost of last year, the 101st Congress for not in 5 months debating and voting on a declaration of war. Bob?
I agree. Memorial services were held here this week for a 45-year-old government lawyer named Kenneth Goshorn. He was a lover of bluegrass music, of sports, of life, and another Washington homicide, shot in his car by a stranger on foot, no motive. The killer, still at large, had blocked Goshorn's car, refusing to move. Meanwhile, Jesse Jackson and other shadow members of Congress are lobbying for District of Columbia statehood. That's an outrage. Before asking for statehood, they ought to bring civilization to the nation's capital.
They ought to bring gun control is what they ought to bring into Virginia and Maryland. Last fall, Pat, the right-wing Dartmouth Review ran a quotation from Adolf Hitler at the start of the Jewish holidays. Prominent national conservatives who bankroll this right-wing student newspaper loudly protested this was sabotage. One asked the Anti-Defamation League to investigate the incident. The League did just that, and this week concluded that the anti-Semitic quote was placed by one of the Review's own staff members. The outrage is that prominent conservatives are not following the lead of Jack Kemp, who years ago disassociated himself from this juvenile and hate-filled newspaper.
I don't know anybody who still even is connected with that paper, do you? At the University of the District of Columbia, the faculty in the Political Science and Urban Affairs Department rejected the bad idea of hiring former Mayor Marion Barry to teach. But Kelsey Jones, the head of UDC's Criminal Justice Department, made just such an offer to Barry, who is currently appealing his conviction on cocaine possession. UDC, a taxpayer-funded institution, has been struggling in recent months. To invite a man with such obvious contempt for the law to teach criminal justice is truly an outrage, almost as big as Novak's.
Pat Buchanan saying good night for the Capitol Gang.
Hello, I'm Charles Crawford. Here's a look at some of the stories we'll be covering at the top of the hour. Soviet gunfire erupted early Sunday in the streets of Lithuania's capital city. Soviet Army troops are now in control of a radio and TV facility in Vilnius. Reports from the capital say at least 8 people were killed and 100 injured. The U.S. Congress today gave President Bush the legal authority to use force to push Iraq's Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. Mr. Bush says a war is not inevitable if Hussein begins to withdraw his troops now. The last American diplomats stationed in Baghdad have left the capital. Along with other Westerners, they arrived today in Frankfurt. Tomorrow they'll head for the U.S. I'm Charles Crawford. We'll have complete information on those stories and more at the top of the hour. Stay tuned.
Now Emporium can help stop the endless cycle of painting and repainting your home exterior with Emporium Home Services Premium Vinyl Siding. A free, no-obligation in-home estimate will show you how we insulate the walls using top-grade insulation boards and then cover with our high-quality vinyl siding. Emporium siding products come in many different colors and styles and at very competitive prices. The difference is so easy to see. Low-maintenance vinyl siding may be the answer for your home. Call Emporium Home Services today for a free estimate.
Save at the giant truckload sale right now at McDuff. Take advantage of McDuff's great truckload buys on the best brand names in audio, video, and TV. Plus, for 1 week only, every major appliance is on sale at McDuff's guaranteed low prices. Save on a Frigidaire heavy-duty washer, only $247.87. Or a Techniques 5-disc CD changer, just $177.87. So come into McDuff during our truckload sale and save.
Remember, your satisfaction is...
Just a little reminder that reliable, trouble-free Hondas are on sale right now at end-of-the-year low prices. So whatever you're riding around in these days, maybe you should think of stopping in for a test drive.
This is CNN.
From Amman, Jordan, this is a special edition of Evans and Novak.
I'm Roland Evans. My guest on this special edition of Evans and Novak is His Majesty King Hussein of Jordan. Your Majesty, if war does break out, and it seems very imminent, will you find it impossible not to hold President Saddam Hussein of Iraq responsible for starting it?
I think only time would tell who would have been responsible for starting it. It's not a judgment that one can give under these circumstances. I believe that probably generations after us will decide.
We'll be back with more questions for His Majesty King Hussein after these messages.
One of the reasons you'll find the new Lexus LS400 luxury sedan so memorable is because it remembers you better than any car in the world. Lexus spent 6 years pursuing consummate luxury. Now, the world's luxury car makers may have to pursue Lexus. Lexus, the result of our relentless pursuit of perfection.
In American business, there is an award bestowed each year upon a select group of companies. Among the 10 recipients this year, AT&T. The award? The San Francisco Examiner's Golden Turkey for the worst advertising of 1990. We at MCI are glad to have this opportunity to give wider publicity for this award.
If your doctor has recommended Metamucil and you like the results, but you don't like those glasses of thick liquid, change to FiberCon. Get the same fiber action in easy-to-swallow tablets. Get doctor-recommended FiberCon.
Surprise! Quaker Oat Squares. You're gonna love them from square one. Love that crunch.
Love the toasty taste. Love the touch of brown sugar.
Surprise! Quaker Oat Squares. You're gonna love them from square one.
Monday, could Operation Desert Shield turn some military towns into ghost towns, paying a different price for war? On CNN's The World Today, 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday.
Welcome back. I'm here in Amman, Jordan, in Al Nadwa Palace with His Majesty King Hussein of Jordan. Your Majesty, I want to know a little bit more about the relationship that you expect to develop and the difficulties between your country and Israel. Have you notified Israel, yourself or your government, that if any Israeli aircraft come over your airspace, you will have to defend that airspace and you will attempt to interdict those aircraft?
So we've made it abundantly clear to all those with whom we have been able to get in touch in the recent past, many leaders in the world, and we have publicly stated that our stance is one of defending our sovereign territory, and we will not stand for any violations either by land or in the air, and we will try our best to prevent them from any quarter.
But, Your Majesty, have you specifically informed the Prime Minister of Israel on that point, or have you simply made a public statement here by your government?
Well, I believe the Israeli Prime Minister must have a clear assessment of where we stand on this particular issue.
Now, the Foreign Minister of Mr. Tariq Aziz, the Foreign Minister of Iraq, has said very recently in Geneva in his conversation with Secretary of State Baker that if war breaks out, there is no question but that, of course, Iraq will attack Israel. Do you believe that statement, sir?
I can not tell what will happen, but I hope and pray still that war won't break out. However, Jordan will do its utmost to prevent, within its capabilities, anyone utilizing either our airspace or violating our land and territory.
If you were to take a crazy transposition of identities, if you were the Prime Minister of Israel and Iraq attacked you with missiles, wouldn't you feel it absolutely incumbent on yourself to reply either by aircraft or missiles yourself?
I suppose that is a possibility, yes.
And therefore, if that happened, you might be brought into the war against Israel.
Well, we'll do everything we can to prevent that occurring.
Can you tell me, sir, that you think this is highly unlikely, or don't you feel confident enough to say that?
I believe if war breaks out, the damage, the human losses, the scope of it is going to be very, very difficult to predict on the human level, in terms of the area it will cover, and in terms of the disaster that it's going to cause this world, both economically and ecologically as well.
Your Majesty, one more question on Israel. You told me, sir, last August when you did this program, that you thought Israel would get involved if war broke out, not at the outset, but before the war ended. Have you changed your mind on that?
If war does break out, nobody can tell, but I do have a feeling that it could be something that is far more ominous and serious in terms of its scope and the area it covers and the people who may be involved in it, willingly or otherwise, than many predict.
Your Majesty, let me ask you another question that you probably think is a crazy question, but do you think it is possible that the United States-led coalition might not come out of this war, if it starts, a complete victor, that there might be some problem in doing what everybody in the West thinks is going to be done, which is to say have a very quick, decisive victory over Iraq?
There are two points I'd like to cover in this answer. I suppose these are the predictions of some amongst the military regarding the actual action that might take place regarding Iraq. But in the final analysis, I don't believe that there will be any victor, that all of us are going to be losers.
The CNN had an interview with President Mubarak of Egypt a day or so ago, and he said, he predicted that the Iraqi ground troops would not fight because they would not have any air cover. Do you agree with the President of Egypt on that?
I regrettably cannot agree with the President of Egypt on a number of points, and I do not agree with him on this particular point that he might have covered. I think that people will defend their territory to the best of their ability, and they will be extremely determined in that respect. But once again, if war erupts, my feeling is that it is going to affect every Arab, every Muslim, no matter where they are. And so what is going to be the final outcome is beyond me, but it will certainly inflame the entire region.
Is it possible to have such a war without major American casualties, Your Majesty, in your opinion?
I can't see that.
You can't say that. Do you think it's possible to win this war if we go into it without house-to-house fighting to recapture Kuwait from Saddam Hussein?
I think it's going to be very bloody and very, very costly to all concerned.
Now, President Mubarak also told CNN that war would set back Iraq up to 100 years, put it back 100 years ago, in the effect on its economy, its people, its structure. Number one, do you agree with that? And number two, is that true of other countries in the region?
Well, it may set Iraq back. That is certainly a possibility in terms of the material damage, in terms of the losses in life, and the losses of many innocent lives. But on the other hand, I believe it is going to set the entire region back. It is going to create a state of turbulence and violence throughout this region. And I think it's going to affect the world as well at this very critical moment in history.
One more question before we take a break on this. Your Majesty, Abdullah Toukan, your science advisor, a graduate of MIT, has predicted publicly that it's very likely that the Iraqis will burn off the flow of oil coming out of 350 wells in Kuwait. That oil flows by gravity, sir, as you know, and you started burning, it would be hard to stop. Number one, what would happen if this is actually done by the Iraqis? And two, how far from the scene would this affect the environment and the climate?
So I attended a conference on the environment in Geneva. And I had also attended earlier on a summit conference in The Hague. And I'm very interested in the environmental dimension. And that's why I asked for some studies to be made before going to Geneva. And what I have in the way of predictions, not only from our own scientists, but collaborated they did with others throughout the world, Americans, British, and other notable figures throughout the world. And the predictions are horrendous, really, in terms of the ecological disaster that could occur and the effects that could not only influence those concerned in the area, but maybe the world as a whole.
We'll be back in a moment after these messages with more questions for His Majesty King Hussein.
How can anyone offer me a computer solution without seeing my business first? That's why we're talking to MicroAge. Instead of trying to sell me something off the shelf, they're coming here to look at my computer needs firsthand.
MicroAge, as close as the telephone. I called MicroAge. They showed us how compact computers can work for us here and on the road. Powerful portables and desktops that can crunch numbers with the best of them.
MicroAge, authorized compact dealer.
Just wait, Jess. 10 years, and we'll have a real house with a real yard where I can sit in the shade and you can run your little tail off. We'll get there, Jess. That's a promise.
Alpo, all the meat dogs love, fortified with all the vitamins and minerals they need to eat well and be well into the future.
It's gonna be gorgeous, Jesse. You'll see.
I have a headache. I have a bad headache. I can't think. I can't concentrate. I feel pain.
Today, Michael Farbstein is trying extra-strength Tylenol gel caps. For pain like his, why take aspirin or ibuprofen when nothing works better than Tylenol gel caps?
My headache is 100% gone. I feel great. I can think. I can concentrate. I can do what I have to do. Tylenol gel caps really did the job.
Tylenol gel caps, only from Tylenol. For everyday pain, nothing works better.
In American business, there is an award bestowed each year upon a select group of companies. Among the 10 recipients this year, AT&T. The award? The San Francisco Examiner's Golden Turkey for the worst advertising of 1990. We at MCI are glad to have this opportunity to give wider publicity for this award.
I'm in Amman, Jordan, with King Hussein, His Majesty, the King of Jordan. I want to turn to some of the diplomatic problems that face the next 3 or 4 days before the deadline of January 15th. Your Majesty, Perez de Cuellar, the head of the UN, is making a last desperate effort to find peace. Do you see any difference in his approach and the approach of President Bush?
I certainly hope that the meeting in Geneva would not be, as many suggest, the end. But
you mean the foreign ministers meeting?
Yes, an incentive to all of us to do everything possible to ensure that war does not take place and that a peaceful solution is found. And I hope that, and feel very strongly that the Secretary General's involvement is a very positive element, and I hope that you will contribute towards averting war and a peaceful solution.
Some people in my country, Your Majesty, and probably out here too, think that the President has used language and body language and real words that have contained threats and against Saddam Hussein beyond that point, which would really encourage him to give up his conquest of Kuwait. Do you think that the President really was trying to get him out of Kuwait, or was leading to a situation where we could go beyond Kuwait and reduce his power, which menaces this whole area, including Israel?
I can't speak for the President, but I certainly heard some very strange language throughout this crisis from many quarters. And yet, on the other hand, I do feel that I was correct from the beginning when I predicted that the language of threats and intimidation would not produce the desired results. I still feel there is a chance, and we are going to do everything we can to avert war if given a chance. After all, I don't believe in my wildest dreams that anybody can be happy about the prospect of thousands and thousands of people dying and others suffering and a disaster occurring of such a magnitude that nobody can live with it.
Do you think the President of the United States has made enough, has given enough help to what is called the Arab solution, Your Majesty? Just be as blunt and frontal as you can on this, sir.
So I secured in the first 48 hours an Iraqi commitment to withdraw from Kuwait. I secured in the first 48 hours of this crisis an Iraqi commitment to attend an Arab summit, a mini summit in Saudi Arabia to resolve this problem. And then everything floundered because others did not keep their part of the agreement. And I have tried since, time and again. But I believe that the Arab dimension in this problem is very much a part of any solution and must hopefully be so in the times ahead.
Well, do you think, sir, just yes or no if you could, do you think that the United States has encouraged the possibility of an Arab solution?
Not as much as I would have wished, and not so far.
And it's now too late, isn't it?
No, it is not too late.
So you think an Arab solution still is possible?
It has to be a part of the solution. It is an Arab and an international issue, so both of them are areas that need to be addressed, and addressed soon.
Your brother, the Crown Prince, Your Majesty, said in a piece that was published in the Boston Globe recently that no one really seems to care about what happens to Jordan. Do you think the United States cares?
I would hope there are many friends of Jordan, many people who have known Jordan over the years that do, yes.
Do you think the United States cares?
We haven't felt that that was really a reality in the recent past, but I think the United States, yes, maybe some not so much at this point in time. We have many friends there.
Your Majesty, you were in Kennebunkport with President Bush of the United States last, I believe, was August, and he mentioned to you the possibility of $2 to $2.5 billion of aid and assistance to your country because of the effect of the sanctions on your economy and blocking all your trade with your biggest trading partner, which was then Iraq. And you deflected the conversation away from money and into the question of how serious a war would be. That's not what the President wanted to hear. He wanted you to join the coalition. You refused. Have you gotten that $2 to $2.5 billion from us since then?
No, we haven't.
Why?
I really don't know. And
well,
as you well
what's your
know,
speculation, sir?
My speculation is that we suddenly confronted a situation that was quite
But you have not violated the sanctions that have been imposed on Iraq by the United Nations. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir. We have not.
There have been no violations.
There have been no violations.
Now, Your Majesty, the New York Times, which is one of the 2 or 3 most prominent newspapers in the United States, carried a piece conspicuously displayed on the op-ed page of the Times 3 or 4 days ago, headed, "King Hussein, Abdicate." The fact that the Times gave this play, this piece such a big play, does that indicate you that there is some subtle movement in the United States to destabilize your regime?
I wouldn't suggest that, because in the final analysis, it's only Jordan and its people, all of its people, who will be capable to answer this question. I believe they are more united than they've ever been, at least in my lifetime.
But your people are more united, and your polls, I'm told, show that your popularity in Jordan is very high. But you put together the lack of delivery on the money that the President suggested the United States would give you if you joined the coalition, plus this piece in the New York Times. Does it indicate to you that there might be something to be concerned about in the development of American policy?
I hope this is a phase that will pass, and I hope
you think it's a phase?
In any event, I link that, obviously, to my hopes and my continued conviction that war cannot take place, because it would be madness. And if we move into an era of peace and a peaceful solution regarding the Gulf situation, then probably people will think again and realize that we had done our utmost to contribute towards peace and nothing else.
Your Majesty, if the United States and its coalition partners killed tens of thousands, or even 5s of thousands of Iraqi soldiers and civilians in air attack, could this make the Intifada, the Palestinian revolution on the West Bank of Palestine next to Israel, could this make give the extremists a larger role and get the Intifada into a situation where it would get out of hand and have a spillover effect among Palestinians in your country?
I believe here in Jordan, people will remain together and remain aware of their responsibilities at this very, very difficult moment. But if you speak of the Intifada, I think the whole Arab world will probably be involved in an Intifada of some kind or another if war breaks out, and if the might of the coalition is directed against Arab people. And I think that the whole area will be destabilized.
But is this a problem for your country in the sense that you have so many Palestinians who are cousins and brothers and friends of the Palestinians on the West Bank? Does this make you fearful?
I don't think we have come down to the point where Palestinians are different to Jordanians or Iraqis or Saudis. I believe that we are all an Arab people. And as a result, I feel that if war broke out and if damage occurred, people will react, because they will consider this to be against them as a whole. And also, I would like to point out, sir, that in Jordan we can see everything on the surface. We can't see it elsewhere, and I believe that the pressure is building and building. And if the spark is ignited, I'm really fearful of what the results would be in this entire region.
Your Majesty, we have to break once more for commercials, but we will be back with the King of Jordan after these messages.
To get rid of her gray, my wife can spend 40 minutes.
But I discovered the 5-minute hair coloring.
The revolutionary discovery called Just for Men from the leader in men's hair coloring. Simply apply Just for Men and in 5 minutes shampoo out.
Gray is blended away. The look of my natural color is back in 5 minutes. That was me, and it won't fade or wash out.
My hair takes forever, but you look great in just 5 minutes.
The look of your natural color in just 5 minutes with Just for Men.
If you want the longest, most convenient office hours of any major California bank, head for Wells Fargo. Our doors are open 9 to 6 every weekday and open from 9 a.m. on Saturdays. So if you want a bank that'll be open when you need it, head for the outfit with the longest hours and climb aboard.
Much obliged, sir. Anytime.
Wells Fargo comes through with the longest hours.
Talks failed in Geneva, but is there still time to negotiate a way out of the Persian Gulf crisis? Experts discuss it Monday on Sonia Live, 1 Eastern, 10 Pacific on CNN.
Your Majesty, the big question. If war breaks out and the United States and the coalition wins it, do you think the Middle East will become the preserve of the United States to run the Middle East as the British ran the Middle East 50 to 100 years ago?
I believe it would be a tragedy, and this will never happen, sir.
Why you say it'll never happen?
Because people will resist it, and maybe force can achieve some initial results, but will be plunged into a disastrous phase that will last for many, many years to come.
And the future of the United States in the region, give me a prediction on that if there is a devastating war.
I don't believe that the future will be a very bright one at all.
For the United States, I'm particularly asking about Your Majesty.
Yes, I mean that.
Well, what will happen? Will the United States be, will our interests be kicked out of the region? Or
I believe
if we win, wouldn't that make us more powerful?
You may win one battle, sir, but you will lose the entire Arab world.
Can you explain that very briefly? It's hard to understand.
Briefly, nobody disputes the power and strength of the United States and its ability to inflict a lot of damage. But it's inflicting such damage in this case, in the case of a war, against an entire Arab people and the Muslim world, and the results will be horrendous.
Your Majesty, we've come to the end. I want to thank you for being with us. King Hussein of Jordan, thank you for that interview, sir.
For a transcript of Evans and Novak, send $3 to Evans and Novak Transcripts, Journal Graphics, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007. Or call 212-227-READ. Your comments may be sent to the same address.